Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Overcoming Shame and Guilt online conference. I'm your host, Ande Anderson, tour guide of Enlightenment Village and co-founder of Avaya. Thank you so much for joining us. And in this conference, as you know, we're discussing the topics of shame and guilt. We're talking to some really incredible experts about this, including authors, psychologists, doctors, thought leaders, and more. And they're sharing with us their insights and their wisdom on shame and guilt. So what are the benefits of experiencing these emotions? What are the drawbacks? How do they affect us in all areas of our life, and how can we learn to let them go? So today our guest is going to be talking about guilt unplugged, waking up from the lie we live. So please welcome John Flaherty. Hi, John.
Hi, Andy. Great to be connected with you today.
Yes, it's wonderful to have you. I'm so excited. And I want to tell everyone a little bit about you and your amazing work before we dive in. So, John is an experienced teacher of spiritual and emotional well-being. He is an expert in the field of addictions and has inspired people in many, many different parts of the world to be free of their addictive behaviors and ultimately to live a more fulfilled and happy life. In his revolutionary book titled Addiction Unplugged, How to Be Free, it's now available in 5 different languages. And then this year, his new book is titled Guilt Unplugged, Waking Up from the Lie We Live. So this was published in English and Polish. So John has helped thousands of men and women to move beyond their addictions and the various associated allies he talks about called guilt, shame, repression, suppression, and depression. So John, given all of that, I would love it if you could just take us on a ride in your understanding of guilt and shame. What are guilt and shame to you?
Sure, Andy. It's for a long time been sitting with me, the importance of being able to put a book together on that topic, certainly a teaching together, because I've become aware over the years that guilt particularly and shame, which follows, are aspects of our life that, first of all, they sit in the consciousness of us all, always residing there. When I say always, they're residing there, well, only until they don't anymore. They're insidious, they can be very destructive, they're punishing, they can be all-consuming. And they're so totally contradictory because, sometimes we can have guilt and shame that follows because of something we feel we have done, we have said, we can't retrace our steps, we can't go back over it, we feel as though it's here to stay. And of course, we feel that the very deep sense of helplessness about that. Then there are other times we can actually, oddly enough, this is the contradiction, feel guilty when we feel joyous. If for a second we think that someone else isn't, for whatever reason, being able to share that same joy with us. So really, my starting place with guilt would be to say that it really doesn't make sense at all. It is a nonsense. And I've also come to the realization, Ande, that it is a lie about life and a lie about ourselves. We've got so used to accepting it that unfortunately we've not really stopped to question it, to question its validity, to question its realness. And same with shame. The difference between the two perhaps would be, in my understanding, is that we can possibly feel guilt without shame, but we can't really feel shame without guilt. Shame more readily jumps into action when guilt is the backdrop. And generally, they form a single complex. And they're always destructive because they keep us in a past, an idea about ourselves, as if we were still living in the past. And of course, it's not possible to do that. There's only the present moment. And in the present moment, to bring and insist that we bring the past and fill the present moment with it will inevitably cause us great disturbance and continued blockage. It's a nonsense, it's a lie, because as and hopefully maybe as I'm speaking with you, I might be able to further elicit on that, because it's something we've learned, but simply not questioned. And if we don't question, we can never expand our consciousness. Now, guilt primarily is the sense of disconnection that we have, not only from life itself, but from those who are in this life with ourselves. It's a sense of gap or alienation between ourselves and what I'm calling life or God, if a person chooses to see the source being that way. It's a very fearful thing, guilt, and it's learned. It comes into being from a very, very early age, a very, very early age. But when we do first enter the world, when we pop out from our mother's womb, we know nothing of guilt. Guilt is certainly not there at the beginning of our life. Neither is shame. Guilt is something that we quickly do begin to accommodate. Guilt is insidious because it creeps in without our notice. It's a very unconscious thing that sometimes arises as a consciousness within our wider consciousness and wreaks absolute havoc in our lives. It can range from the innocuous to something that is deeply, deeply hurtful and damaging to us. Guilt for some person might be finding themselves reaching a traffic light, a policeman rides up alongside, and for the split second they feel, whoop, have I got my hands on the steering wheel? Have I made sure my mobile telephone is switched off? It's that feeling of, could I possibly be getting something about my life wrong? It's the possibility that I might be failing, that I might not be getting life right, and therefore I could be getting life wrong. And the shame that follows that is the feeling of being ashamed that we hold on to. We create a story about ourselves thereafter. That's very, very incriminating, very, very destructive to our being, to our magnificent being. But when we come into the world, we don't have a shred of that, not at an early stage. However, something very incredible happens in our formative stages of our life. And this is the case with every single being on this planet. When we are in the early stages of our development, we don't know. We don't know what a this is, we don't know what a that is, we don't know what a who is, we don't know who we are, we haven't any kind of concept. We don't have a language, therefore we don't have thought to go with it. We simply know that we're being. And the child at that age is full of exploration, excitement, joy, wonder, because guilt is not there. There's no scrap of difference between your being and that to which we think we have to get everything so right, or experience the consequences of possibly getting life wrong. No, it's absolute free abandon. And within the very first few years, as many as 10 billion neurons are buzzing through our brains and forming beautiful connectors. They're called synapses, junctions in the neural network of our brain. That's absolutely right from the very beginning. In fact, within those first couple of years, first 2 years of our existence, 1.8 million per second of these wonderful neurons are being formed. Connections, expansion, creativity, everything new. We're the new kid on the block. There's great attention being shown to us. Everybody wants to see the new baby. You know, oh, let's have a little look at can I hold the baby? Can I see the baby? Yeah, we're very special for a relatively short space of time. And then suddenly, and this happens for every single one of us, within the next 2 years, there's a dramatic culling. As much as 50% of those neurons are what are called pruned. The synapses, rather, are pruned away. They break off. When we begin to feel inferior, we begin to feel less important, less worthy of a place on the planet. We're now just like everybody else. We're no longer as special. We're not being the same amount of attention. And from that 50% of the neural network that's going on in our brain, and of course in our worthiness about our very self, we form a reality about life. And unfortunately, guilt and shame immediately take almost first place, simply because of the way humanity itself has been conditioned. We've all bought in to the big lie about our very beautiful personal sovereignty, our essence. We've become diminished in comparison. And that, first and foremost, is brought about by our interaction with our parents, who say, of course, they only want the best for us, and indeed, in most cases, they do. And even if we have the most loving parents on the planet, their best for us is really not the same as the source of life, which is sourcing us, which is pure beauty, which is unconditional in love. Many parents will think that they give conditional love. In fact, they're pitted with conditions because they always want a something from us that we can maybe live up to, or if we don't, we feel the shame and definitely the sense of guilt about if we don't measure up to it. And so there is that constancy going on all of the time. Soon after our parental effect, and that is, of course, the first port of call, comes schooling. Schooling does much the same. It teaches us about an authority. It introduces us to ways in which we can get life more right and the possibility that we could possibly get it wrong. We're rewarded with times when we're doing well, and we're punished when we don't always meet, the same levels of expectancy from us. We begin to conform both intellectually and socially. We lose our sense of personal sovereignty, Ande. And in that lies and resides guilt, the feeling of disconnect. We're always trying to merit reward, gain some kind of acceptance. Our religions and our cultural background have truly and utterly added to this, unbelievably so. I come from a very religious background. I teach spirituality, but I do know, unfortunately, that our religions have a high investment in reward and punishment, shame and guilt, right and wrong, success and failure. In fact, most of our religions even have their own name for it. They call it sin. They make a definition between sin almost being the same as mistake and error. And punishment has to be actually felt, reward gained in order to regain our connectivity with God again. Or so the story of our religions go. It comes from that age-old myth of Adam and Eve and the story that follows, that we could actually make the wrong decision and then constantly have to feel the fallout over that. Now, something has to interrupt that, Ande. Something has to interrupt that big time for the individual that's maybe watching this particular interview with myself, if they really want to let go and release that altogether from their psyche. And when things get really bad, people, I assure you, are desperate to do that, but we've never been shown how to do so. We've never been given the permission. And even the name of the conference, Overcoming Guilt and Shame, even that's too hard. It's too difficult. It's not about overcoming anything, really. That's to keep it real. That's to actually keep the problem in place if we think we're having to overcome a lie. But the lie itself needs to be dissolved, okay? Really released and let go. How does that happen? Only when we become more consciously aware of our being. Only when we return, if you like, to the norm of the Creator, to the beauty of the child that was beauty, that was without guilt, that was without shame, and then thought that they had to gain the favor, whether it was of a parent or a teacher or of our religion, or even of a culture, or of the government, or the whomever were perpetuating some idea in God we trust. which is even there on the American currency. And it's just the same here in the UK, where this idea of, behind any authority is that same fear of a God that can actually say, you've either got it right or you've got it wrong. You've got to inherit something very special, or unfortunately for you, sorry, you've missed the mark. That's a hellish struggle for any one of us to try to keep going without stopping and to question. So really, in answer to your opening there, Ande, why am I so adamant about this? Why have I come on to interview? It's to really, because I've come across so many people everywhere in the world racked by the pain of it. And I know it's also unnecessary, but it is due to a false understanding about our very being. It's my teaching to turn that completely and utterly on its head, to express to every individual that it is within their realm. In fact, it's their responsibility to give their beautiful self back to their self. And that is what I'm meaning by personal sovereignty, the essence, the soul, that which actually never changes, that which knows nothing of those words, guilt, shame.
Wow. That's beautiful.
Nothing.
So given all of that, like, is it even possible for people to make a mistake?
Is it possible to make? There's no such thing as a mistake. There is something that we would at one time have done, said, thought, believed in, fought for. And just like everything, if we stop, even as you've asked that question, as the viewer is watching this interview, and honestly ask themselves, have I ever done that? And then have I done it so differently somewhere further along the line? Of course we have. Of course we have. Because we're changing all of the time, Ande. We cannot not. Life is changing all of the time. Life, you see, the amazing thing is, it doesn't bear a grudge. The world does. We've learned a world's way of existing, of trying to pit our way through this strange thing we call, well, which we believe is based on reward and punishment. And which, as I've said, through all those different means, whether it's parental, whether it's the way we were handled well or poorly as a child, whether it was with teachers, whether it was religious, whether it was through politics, whether it's been by government, whether it's been in our education system, whether it's even going to a medical practice who will say, if you don't follow this particular procedure, you're not going to get well, and if you do, then you will get well. Somehow or other, we've got to rein back in our own sense of worth and responsibility. Can we make a mistake? Absolutely not. But it is important that we keep making a decision from the place that brings us freedom. And again, that's not something we've been taught. How do we learn not to make a mistake that feels like such a mistake? We make it by taking 100% responsibility for our precious being. And Albert Einstein, who must have been a most amazing being, we've got lots of his teachings. One of the things he essentially expresses is the most important decision that any one of us can ever make in this life is to ask ourselves and then answer it 100% truthfully. Do I believe in a hostile or a friendly universe? Change that to, do I believe in a hostile or a friendly God? Do I believe in a hostile or a friendly life? Do I believe in a hostile or a friendly education system? Do I believe in a hostile or a friendly parent? Hostile and a friendly religion? Because the answer to which actually affects every mortal thing else. We've only been trained and learned and taught to actually believe in a hostile universe, because it's the most marvelous way of keeping control. That's why governments love it so much. That's why politicians know it so well. That's what has kept religions going for so long. They know it keeps control. over people. They're the authority, as if they were from the outside, that can actually teach the inside what is possible and what is not allowable. That's what we must draw a line under and let go. It is only then that we can possibly even entertain the idea that we can fully believe in what we once knew but have forgotten to remember, that life is actually an incredibly friendly place of existence, that it does not know judgment. Life, it's just lifing us, Andy. It's just lifing us. It's just lifing us. It doesn't know judgment. It doesn't know how to punish. The world does, and unfortunately we don't make that distinction very easily. We tend to think of them as being one and the same. I always used to. I have discovered the hard way. My teaching is to really allow a person to maybe discover this the easier way. When we make a friend of life, we are no longer having to feel as though we're up against it. We're no longer having to prove. We're no longer having to look for approval. Therefore, we don't feel ashamed when we make a mistake, which is not really a mistake. It is only just moving into the next possible experience of our life. Guilt destroys if we entertain it, because guilt is static. It was how we label a past experience, and when we bring it into the present, it feels like we have to somehow or other keep honoring it and being answerable to it. As soon as we drop that, and the only way to drop that is by becoming more consciously aware. If you permit me just for a moment, what I'm meaning by becoming more consciously aware, I'm a teacher of spirituality and a teacher of emotional well-being. I have great respect for Ande Ashanti, another well-known spiritual teacher. He has the most compact and beautiful way of expressing what I'm sharing with you today. And he simply puts it this way. He says, make no mistake about it. Enlightenment, this becoming more conscious aware, pushing out the boundaries, beginning to question life rather than just take it all on board and plow our way through it, experiencing the consequences. Enlightenment, he said, is actually a destructive process in itself. It has nothing whatsoever to do with becoming better or being happier. Enlightenment, Ande teaches, is the crumbling away of untruth. And I think that's the most beautiful way to describe it. It's a seeing through the facade of pretense. It's the complete eradication of every single thing we imagined to be true. Now, I can't possibly put it any better than that. That's why I have such respect for that teaching. But I really invite those who are listening to this conference, and particularly to the words I'm sharing with you, which is absolutely coming not from John Flaherty, not from any intellect here, not from me thinking I know everything that you don't yet know, but is actually being really spoken in this moment, absolutely from my soul to your soul. And if you allow that, you'll know what I'm speaking to be true as I do, a real truth about an otherwise lie that is so destructive in our life. Because when we do question, when we do crumble away that which we haven't learned to question, our inner knowing always does know the way. It knows the difference. How do we let go of shame? How do we let go of this thing called guilt? In the book, and I know you'll mention this a little bit at the end, Ande, but in Guilt Unplugged, in a very succinct and very direct way, it has been my teaching to help a person to move through that lie to a place of remorse. Remorse has far more fluidity about it, and it's possible for everyone. It's possible for the monk in the monastic cell who's praying for repentance and desperately wanting to clear him or self of guilt and shame. seeking God, wanting to do penance, doing it the hard way. As it is true for the inmate in the prison cell, who maybe feels that their sense of guilt was through things that were deemed to be so awful that they maybe have had to spend a lifetime behind prison bars. But it has been my experience with those even on death row that when they experience remorse, they realize the beauty of an expanded consciousness. Not a conscience, which is really just the ego's way of collecting data about all those old shameful things and guilt-ridden things that we've been taught we had to accommodate. But consciousness is that which helps us to question and see and shed new light on that which we hadn't done before. And often enough, it enables the person who may be there at death's door because of their crimes or misdemeanors. But life is still life in them. They still have to get up the next day. Life is not holding any judgment against their motives, because life is only treating us as we are in the present moment. And that's the most freeing and beautiful thing for each of us to grasp. Now, I'm not saying for a moment that we become therefore carefree and do anything else. It's quite the opposite of that. That's the psychopathic or the totally unnecessary way for any of us to think that we would go about life. It's quite the opposite. It's to take complete responsibility for our being, away from those who have actually had the authority and held it from us, and then move through life with greater ease. I don't know how we're doing for time, Andy.
We are getting a little close to running down on time. I know that you wanted to share a process also, the self-forgiveness, self-healing at some point too.
If I may, yeah.
Yes.
And if that's okay, because it'll only take a few minutes.
Yes.
I would really like to do that. It's literally from the last part of my book, Andy, if it fits right and feels right to you today.
Yes, go for it.
But basically, if we can, just make that shift. Guilt to remorse to regret. Regret, there's a beautiful origin of the word regret, which simply means to re-greet. In other words, from a new consciousness, we see things in a new light. We see things as we would see them now. And then we see things now, they're so different from whenever we committed the things that made us feel so guilty or shameful about in the past. And this, I suggest, is how we move from regretting the new, to a place of connectivity, going full circle. It's the place of metanoia. Metanoia meaning a complete change of heart, a shift in consciousness. If you wish, if you're watching this now, you might want to close your eyes, and you can actually really go to heart, where perhaps so much guilt and unnecessary shame has been residing, and call it out. But we do so in the present moment, and we do with a clear and an obvious consciousness. I now release the heavy burden of guilt, which has kept me from enjoying the completeness I long to experience. I honor the character, the sovereignty, the essence of my being. New revelations have brought new realizations into my awareness, and now I understand what I did not understand in the past. Whatever I have done, whatever I think I've not done enough, whatever I think I may have done, whatever I think I should have done, or think I should not have done, I know that I'm not here to suffer anymore. My attention belongs in the present. Whatever I have said, whatever I think I've not said enough, whatever I think I may have said, whatever I think I should have said, or think I should not have said, I know that I'm not here to suffer anymore. My attention belongs in the present. Whatever I have thought, whatever I think I've not thought enough, wherever I think I may have thought, whatever I think I should have thought, or think I should not have thought. I know that I'm not here to suffer anymore. My attention belongs in the present. Whatever I've kept secret, whatever I think I've not kept secret enough, whatever secret thoughts I may have been thinking, whatever I think I should have kept secret or think I should not have kept secret, I know that I'm not here to suffer anymore. My attention belongs in the present. Whatever I've promised, whatever I think I've not promised enough, whatever I think I may have promised, whatever I think I should have promised or think I should not have promised, I know that I'm not here to suffer anymore. My attention belongs in the present. Ande, it's so much about shifting, not so much from feeling so sorry about the things I've done, but to the understanding I now see things differently, and now I understand.
Thank you. Ooh. It's very powerful. And I hope everyone watching also, took that on and really dove into it. That was very powerful for me. Clearly, I, got very emotional in that. So that was amazing. Thank you so much, John.
And it is important that emotions do come to the fore. Neither guilt or shame are emotions, but they do sit, they underlie every single one of our emotions and only wreak havoc if we allow them to do so. They dissolve once we become consciously aware.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's absolutely beautiful. And I would love it if you'd share with everyone now about your book, since you just, dove into that process. And I want to just tell everyone real quick, there's a button below this video right now that links right over to your book. So I'd love to, hear more about it. What is it? Tell us more.
Bless you, Ande. Yeah, in a nutshell, the book is, it's written for everyone. It's written deliberately in a nice, easy to read format. It is Kindle as well as in paperback. It's also in Polish already, which is great to know that it's already beginning to become available in different languages, primarily available from Amazon, though all major distributors will certainly be able to get a hold of the book for you. An essential book, and with the book, I'd also like people to know, Ande, if it's at all helpful to them, that they can contact me or my lovely wife, Anne Louise. We for a long time now, for many years, usually through the processes of working with people in addiction where shame and guilt are always central, have been sharing this new message of teaching of hope and empowerment, where maybe hopelessness and powerlessness has for far too long been engaged. So people know that you can make direct connection with us through Zoom, through Skype, through all those means. We're based here in England, but we do speak with people all over the world. Beautiful, beautiful way of living. As we teach and as we enjoy the freedom that people give and permit themselves, of course, we are doing likewise all the time, just like you've experienced there. Lovely releasing of emotion as I've been sharing that. It's a message. It's nothing to do with John Flaherty. It's everything to do with soul. The soul actually making way in your soul for a very, very different perception of what we thought was so true. It's actually such a lie. Forget the lie.
Thank you, John. And so there's a link below to your book, and there's also going to be a link below to your website, so you can check out John and Anne Louise's work and connect with them. So thank you so much. This has been absolutely beautiful and powerful, and I'm so glad that you could come on the conference. Are there any last little tidbits you'd like to share before we hop off?
That's it, Tiffin. Hey, how long do you want me to go on for this? With you for a very long time, and perhaps we will again sometime, Ande. But in a nutshell, the process is guilt through shame to a place of remorse to a place of regret. Then the movement is moving, and then back to a place of connectivity again. In simpler form, revelation. I've maybe opened up some new revelations to those who are watching today. soon as you allow the possibility of that, a new realization dawns. As soon as a new realization dawns, this beautiful process of metanoia, which is the shift, the leap in consciousness, is there. It's there going ahead of you. It's up to us just to kind of catch up with it, in a sense, and to take it on board. It's freedom. It's a return to the beauty of the child before ever it learned. So all those so awful, 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 punishing, difficult, hardship ways that we've been presented in this life, which is not really at all about the beauty of life at all. Not at all.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. I appreciate everything. It's just been lovely connecting with you. And thank you, everybody, so much for tuning into John's incredible interview. All right, everyone, here is to our collective journey to self-love and healthy relationships. Bye, everybody. Hey everyone, I just got off a really, really powerful interview with John Flaherty. Wow, what an amazing interview. You know, obviously you probably noticed like I became really emotional when he did that process near the end. So he ran us all through this process of self-forgiveness and self-healing. And I thought it was so incredibly powerful. And it is part of the book that he was sharing with us too. So I highly recommend you check that out. So I really loved this. What an amazing interview. And I love that he took us on what I would say was probably a very different ride than many people are taking us on in this conference, in that, you know, taking a look at guilt and shame as a lie, right? As something that's not actually real, something that we think is real that's not. And the importance of, first of all, being consciously aware, right, of these things we call guilt and shame, and questioning them as, are they real? Are they, you know, are they learned? Clearly they're learned. There's something that we learned as children, like he was discussing. So I think this is a really powerful way to be looking at guilt and shame. And it certainly, at least in my experience, takes the power away from them in so many ways by looking at them as this lie, right? So that was just some amazing stuff that he talked about. A couple other things I really thought were really powerful was when he was talking about guilt and shame stemming from us thinking that we don't have life right. He said that many times, right? We don't have life right. And that led me to ask him about, like, you know, mistakes. Are there any mistakes? And he's saying, no, there's no mistakes. So this is a very powerful topic. And we're looking at this in a much deeper dive than I think a lot of the other times we've looked at this. So if you take a look at, there are no mistakes, that it's not possible for you to make ultimately a mistake, right? That this world is unfolding perfectly, then you can't get life wrong, right? So if you can't get life wrong, then how do guilt and shame even exist? So, you know, really deep stuff. So I love this. I highly recommend, again, you look more into John's work and take a look at his book, because he clearly goes, you know, deep into the rabbit hole with this concept. Another thing that he talked about was judgment. And it actually reminded me a lot of what my partner Ike says frequently, is judgment is the glue that binds us to our illusions. So just take a moment to let that sink in, right? Judgment is the glue that binds us to our illusions. So this is really similar to what John's talking about, as in guilt and shame are not real, right? They are illusions. So if we are judging ourselves for taking the right turn instead of the left turn, or saying X when we meant to say Y, or whatever it is, right? That judgment is, you know, binding us to our illusions. And it certainly doesn't make for a very happy existence when we are continuously judging ourselves. And I definitely know this from personal experience, and I'm sure everyone watching right now has, you know, many scenarios of self-judgment. So these are just a lot of really great, deep, you know, pieces of food for thought that I want you to, you know, sit with after this interview, and, you know, listen to this over and over again, because you can really get, I think, a lot out of that exercise that we went through at the end. I thought that was just really, really powerful, and really helps you let go of emotion and let go of what you're holding on to. So that's a lot of food for thought. A lot of great stuff came out of this interview. I hope you really enjoyed it. I will see you on the next one. Thanks, everybody.